Hey everybody, welcome to Guitars and Music. I hope you'll consider subscribing. I have 458 subscribers. I'd like to get up to 500 for some bizarre reason. But you know, the other day I just played through a backing track of Sunshine of Your Love by Cream. I love the Now You Shred backing track site, and he uploaded one, and I just played through it and just uploaded it right on the channel. And I got out my old wah-wah pedal and just kind of had some fun with it. And then I started thinking a little bit about using a wah-wah pedal, Cream, those kind of wild solos that are sort of juvenile delinquent. Whenever I hear those solos, for some reason they were taken very seriously at their time, but now whenever I hear them, I think of, you know, Wayne's World or Bill and Ted or Beavis and Butthead, or they just feel kind of juvenile to me. But it did make me think a little bit about Cream. So it's Sunday, beautiful day out, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about Cream. That's a very important band. You know, I would not say it's my favorite band that Clapton's ever been in. I might even say it's my least favorite. I'm not going to try to rank or sort of categorize in some definitive way, but I might say it's my least favorite period of Clapton's music, and yet I might think maybe it's the most important thing he's ever done in terms of the larger music. I think maybe, I don't know. So I just kind of wanted to give some thoughts about Cream. I grew up listening to a fair amount of Cream. Cream came out in 1966, and Clapton had been playing right before that with John Mayall, and he had quit the Yardbirds to join John Mayall. Then he was in John Mayall's Blues Breakers for just a little while, dropped down that awesome album, a so-called Beano album. And then, if you hear John Mayall before, he barely was in John Mayall, and all of a sudden, John Mayall heard rumors that Eric Clapton was playing with Jack Bruce and Ginger Baker, and they were forming a new band, and that was Cream, and that was the end of John Mayall and the Blues Breakers with Eric Clapton. And then he joined this band called Cream, and that was in 1966, and they were only together for 2 years, 66 through 68. I don't think they played in 69. 69 was a blind faith year for Eric Clapton, so Cream was around from 66 to 68. And, they were groundbreaking. They were very serious music, and however dated it sounds, that's when I kind of was getting the wah-wah out and playing those old things. It's almost like wearing a Halloween costume with, only with sound instead of clothes, that wah-wah. But, it was a very important step in music. Music at that time was all AM music, so, which I love, by the way, but you had I Want to Hold Your Hand, I'm a Believer, by the Monkees, and just all that wonderful stuff, by the way. Just any of that great old AM, we used to call it bubblegum music or top 40, and a lot of those songs were very well crafted. I never cut down those songs. Those were top-notch songs, really well done. A lot of them came out of the Brill Building in New York, or the Wrecking Crew in LA, or maybe in Detroit, Motown, a couple other studios, but just really some of the best music in the world of its time. But it was a very defined format, a very commercial format. So when Cream came out, it was groundbreaking because they were so experimental, and they did all kinds of wild extended solos. They did play a lot of blues. Now, if you look, they did like Rollin' and Tumblin', Willie Dixon's Spoonful. So they always did a lot of blues because Clapton's background was in blues, but Jack Bruce and Ginger Baker had been in a jazz group called the Graham Bond Band. So I guess that we would call that serious music, kind of British jazz. Eric Clapton was British blues. So they always did blues, but they did sort of wild, they kind of threw out the rule book and just would play. And they would play, it was almost like three guys soloing at once, And that's another interesting thing about when Cream developed, they kind of pioneered, in a way, the power rock trio. Now, the trio, if you think about it, is a tried and true format. I mean, there are classical music trios. In Americana, there are a lot of trios. You usually have a bass and a guitar and maybe a third instrument, a second guitar, but usually have to have some pretty good players to do a trio. Jazz, of course, would be a place where I think of a lot of trios where a lot of really good jazz players like the trio format. But it was really new to have a rock trio. So today we kind of take that for granted, all the power trios. Led Zeppelin live, at least, was basically a power trio. The Who was basically a power trio. Hendrix was a power trio. Robin Trower did most of his stuff as a power trio. Rush was a power trio. Cream would kind of pioneered that format, which is a very pared down format, and you have to have three great players, which Cream did. They had, of course, Jack Bruce on bass, Ginger Baker on drums, and then Clapton on guitar. It was a very kind of wild music, and also music was changing. Distortion, it was entering into guitar. Now, I don't think Eric Clapton is as associated with distortion pedal. Usually when you hear about the early fuzz pedals of that period, like the Maestro and the Octavia, I don't even know. You can read, that JHS channel always has some good history of this guitar pedals, but I don't associate Clapton too much with the history of overdrive. Keith Richards, right around that time, did I Can't Get No Satisfaction. I think that was a Maestro. I do think Clapton used a distortion type or a boost pedal of some kind on the John Mayall album. But one problem, I'll tell you, if you want some distortion on your guitar, problem solved. Get yourself a big fat Marshall stack of some kind or a comparable amp. Get in a big room and turn it up to 11. You got the reverb and delay from the room itself. You've got distortion, up from playing so loud. But he kind of pioneered this woman tone, so-called. But the one effect that he did make use of in that period, as well as Hendrix would be another one, was the wah-wah pedal. Now, the wah-wah pedal's I think it's kind of like a tone control that just goes up and down, whereas a vibrato is sort of a similar thing, but it's a volume control. I think wah-wah is a tone control. So as your foot goes up and down, you're just adjusting the tone, if I'm not mistaken. Correct me if I'm wrong. But it's a pretty wild effect, and today I think it sounds, like I said just a few minutes ago, it's kind of dated. There are some beautiful things you can do with the wah-wah pedal. You hear a lot of wah-wah pedal on really kind of sweet soul. One song, for some random reason, I always think of with nice wah-wah pedal that's used in a kind of orchestral way is, I believe, Barbra Streisand, The Way We Were. You hear some of that really nice kind of adult contemporary. I don't know if it's a wah-wah pedal, but it sounds to me like they're using like a wah-wah pedal, but very tastefully. But in Cream and Hendrix, they just used it, just wow, 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 and they would be playing. And these big, long solos, and a lot of them, I used to have Cream live too. And of course, I listened to a lot of Cream growing up, so I'm pretty familiar with their music. And, there would be like Politician, there'd be maybe a couple lines and then just big solos. And of course, you've only got three guys, so they would just, it wasn't even like any one person was taking a solo, like, first Dwayne Allman takes a solo, then Dickie Betts or whatever. This was just like drum solo, bass solo, and guitar solo all at the same time, which is pretty cool. But I'm not sure it stands the test of time that well, quite frankly. I'm not, who am I to criticize Cream, but I think they were kind of their time. The other thing I think about Cream is those big, long solos that they did were, I think, very important. And all the bands at that time did these big, long, extended jams. Now, today, that's, long songs become a signature of FM classic rock. I don't know if we still have that, but, you have songs like Freebird and, whatever, songs that become pretty long and extended. But Cream was a pioneer in these kind of long improvisational songs. And, I heard Clapton himself use the term self-indulgent, and he used a sexual metaphor that has to do with self-indulgence as well. One time, someone said, but and he said, people, you play one blues song with 2 verses, and you extended it out with 30 minutes of soloing, and when the end, people clap, but they're really kind of clapping because it's over. It's so long, but. The thing about, I always sort of thought about that is as I've gotten older, I gained some perspective. You know, when I was a kid, I listened to Cream, and they seemed like kind of like one of this iconic bands to me. But now that I'm older, I realize, hey, those guys were, at least Clapton, I think Baker and Bruce were a little older, but Clapton was in his early mid-20s. Early 20s probably. And, soloing like that is a great way to practice. I don't even like the word practice, but it's a great way to learn and master your instrument. When you solo like that, you are exploring the boundaries of your instrument, the boundaries of your craft. And I always think that's what Cream really did most of all. They really explored the boundaries of their musical instruments. I guess Jack Bruce on bass and Ginger Baker on drums, and especially I think Eric Clapton. And he took a lot of those blues licks and blues idioms that he was so good at, but he really kind of expanded upon them in the kind of psychedelic freewheeling format of that period. Which seems kind of way out there to us today, was, I think, even though Clapton doesn't really do that much anymore, unless, there's a Cream reunion, or they do but he always has ever since then done extended solos, He's got a bigger band. I think there's more discipline. They have more of a purpose. But the extended solo is where you really kind of explore the boundaries of your instrument. And Cream was, I think, really important in that. And it's a great way to write songs. So I read somewhere that, was it Time or Breathe? But what's the Pink Floyd song on Dark Side of the Moon that goes E minor to A? Well, there's a version of like that on one of their earlier albums that is also E minor to A, and when you hear it, you can kind of hear it's that Dark Side of the Moon song. And the Pink Floyd, you should just play that like for 45 minutes at a time, E minor to A, and just kind of do all these wild things. Now, that would be a classic example of what somebody would find repetitive, or, people might sniff their noses at it, unless they were in the audience having a good time right along with the band. But you know what? Out of that, all that extended kind of free-form, self-indulgent soloing that feels so good to the musicians when you're playing it, out of that, over time, evolved one of the great songs on Dark Side of the Moon. I heard that also about American Woman. I heard Randy Bachman tell the story. They wrote that bam, 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 for American Woman, and they played it like for an hour at some party, I think it was the 60s, and there may have been some other substances involved or something, but they played it for like an hour, down, 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 and it just felt so good, and it was self-indulgent. But, over time, Bachman kind of developed that great lead guitar solo. It all kind of evolved, and as you keep playing it, and the singer started singing that, and what's really actually kind of a tight commercial song kind of evolved and morphed out of what was really a pretty wild, reckless abandonment of a party jam. And it just kind of kept evolving. And I think there's a lesson there somewhere. I write songs, and some of the songs that I've written that I'm most pleased with, I'm just kind of noodling around, and I kind of start doing something, and I'm just kind of play it over and over. And after a while, and you do different things, different variations, kind of let the music kind of take you wherever it goes. And after a while of doing that, it's almost kind of you enter another state of consciousness. But sometimes when you come out of the other side, you've got something that's more coherent that you can kind of trim and have a little more discipline and turn into a pretty structured, nice little song. And I feel like some of those long jams, they helped people that were still young. I'm old now, so I look at them. They were still young. Clapton was, what, 23, 24 or whatever at that time. And he was still young, and it helps you learn your instrument. That's like sports. That's like athletics, playing so long and as hard and as fast as you can and as hard as you can, and doing all kinds of things. It makes you a virtuoso, and that's what I guess Cream is associated with, being a virtuoso player. And that's what it does. It really turns you into a maestro. And it also hopefully gives you a window into some good songs, because when you play so long like that, there are gems in there. You just have to cut out all the other junk and find the gems. And with Cream and some of those other bands of that period, you kind of got to hear them in this experimental stage. It's kind of cool in a way. But that kind of takes me to my final point about Cream, is what they lacked, I think. I'm not being critical of Cream. Clapton is probably the most critical person of Cream that I can think of off the top of my head. But what I think Cream lacked, if I were going to make a criticism, is they lacked a singer-songwriter. So, like if you look at the Guess Who, they had those long jams, but then they had like two great songwriters, Randy Bachman, Burton Cummings, both awesome songwriters. And I think Cream didn't have a really top-of-the-line songwriter or a singer. And so the soloing, I don't think they obviously wrote like Sunshine of Your Love. I think Clapton wrote Strange Brew. They had co-writers on a lot of that. But they didn't have a really in-the-box, ready-to-go singer-songwriter of some kind. And I think that kind of hurt the band, because once you get done with all those crazy long solos and the wigs and the psychedelic guitars and the pink pants, you need to have good songs. And I think that maybe it was something that limited Cream. And that's why it's so interesting that Blind Faith came out right after Cream. And if you look at Blind Faith, basically Steve Winwood joined with Ginger Baker and Eric Clapton. There's some the mix-ups of how they got Ginger Baker and Blind Faith's another story, but Blind Faith ended up being Eric Clapton and Ginger Baker, 2/3 of Cream, plus Stevie Winwood, and then they swapped out Jack Bruce with Rick Gretsch. But I actually like Blind Faith better, because I think you have more of a songwriter sensibility with Stevie Winwood. Now, Clapton was starting to write songs. He wrote, like I said, Strange Brew. And on Blind Faith, I think he wrote an important song, Presence of the Lord, which showed that he was going to start writing more songs. I always think Clapton writes some excellent songs, but I'm sure he would say this, he's a guitar player first. But Stevie Winwood's a great songwriter, and so you kind of took some of the sensibilities of Cream and this kind of psychedelic, experimental aspects of Cream, but you added in someone that was a little more grounded in the real world with songwriting sensibilities like Stevie Winwood, and voila, you've got a pretty good band. Now, Blind Faith, I think, also never really got a chance to develop. They kind of threw an album together and went on tour, and the tour ended up being kind of more like Cream, plus Stevie Winwood, I think, to an extent. But you know what? I like Blind Faith better than Cream, because I do think it has more of that songwriting sensibility that Cream lacked. And so, like I said, people can be kind of critical of the Blind Faith album. I read some of the reviews on Amazon. But, Sea of Joy, Had to Cry Today, Can't Find My Way Home, those are really nice Stevie Winwood songs, and I think they would have made great Traffic songs. Kind of like Dear Mr. Fantasy. Look at all the great Rock and Roll Stew. Look at all the great stuff that Traffic did. And then and Clapton was also playing quite a bit with Dave Mason, or in and around this time, who ended up playing with Traffic. So I actually think that was the weakness of Cream, more than just all the crazy. A lot of that craziness was the time, you know. And like I said, today it's kind of funny. It's almost, oh, listen to the wah wah pedal. It's almost kind of like a joke or Halloween costume. But some of the craziness of Cream, I don't think they ever had the grounding and the core of a really good singer-songwriter. I was going to say good singer, and I might, like, Roger Daltrey was a good singer, Robert Plant's a good singer, and then you can kind of organize the band around that. So even just having a good vocalist, period, I think would have helped Cream, because I don't think, Clapton sang in Cream and Jack Bruce sang, but, to have a really, like, top-notch designated vocalist in that format might have helped them. But I also think they didn't have like a really songwriter, and that's what, like, the Who was a power trio if you think about it, but Pete Townshend wrote all those great songs, and once you start producing all these great songs, you further evolve as a band beyond all the wild stuff. The Who could play well. Look at Live at Leeds. The Who did a lot of wild, crazy stuff, but you know what, because of the quality of Pete Townshend's songwriting, they would settle into really well done songs. And I think the band, which came out right around this time, and songs like The Weight and some of those early band songs, were also showing the weariness that a lot of people had, including the musicians themselves, of those crazy long jams and the wild wah-wah pedal solos and everything. And so I do think Cream is kind of its time, Some things age well and others don't, But, I was watching Mayberry RFD the other day, or Andy Griffith, and I thought, it's dated in some ways, the Cars, and maybe certain things about it are dated, but parts of that show are timeless, It's almost like Thornton Wilder novels or something. But some of the things that seem the most modern at the time, Cream was the most modern thing ever. There's a lesson here somewhere. Cream was the most, I remember I heard someone say White Room was so modern, so modern. It was like London, modern London, Well, it's funny that the thing that sounded so modern then is what sounds so dated to us now. And the things that kind of stand the test of time are more grounded in more than fleeting trends, I guess. But Cream is a very important band. No, the playing in it is great. Even if it's kind of wild, you got to pull out what you want from it. But it kind of ushered in classic rock, if you think about it, along with maybe Hendrix and some of the other bands, but maybe especially Cream, kind of ushered in classic rock and the non-commercial side. How driven music was by marketing and things in those days. Well, Cream liberated music in a lot of ways and opened the door up for a lot of the great music that came along later in the 60s and all through the early and mid 70s, especially. Some really great music that kind of stood on the shoulders of Cream. So I do respect Cream a lot. It's not a band I listen to a lot. I mean, if I hear Crossroads or something, I'll turn it up. But if you it's like a lot of things in history. You have to kind of put yourself in that time and place and think about, well, how would people have perceived this? And at least for the fans that like Cream, now obviously not everybody did probably. Remember this was a period when the Archies were popular, so. Which is good. By the way, I like the Archies. But if you liked Cream, they were groundbreaking. Absolutely groundbreaking. And in a way, they were so modern. I mean, that seems weird to us today, but they were supposed to be this modern English, sound, and intellectual and all these kinds of things. And it's ironic that today those things sound so dated to us. I find that ironic. They say if you that's like people that are always contemporary are always dated. Like if you're always upset about today's newspaper, well, tomorrow there's another newspaper. But everything, all these trends change, So sometimes the players that are more grounded in something that sticks around last, which I think is what Clapton did, But anyway, I kind of want to say that about Cream, sort of inspired by my unedited playthrough of Sunshine of Your Love, but I do have a lot of respect for the band, and I think it's a critical part of Clapton. I think it's a component of what Clapton's always been ever since, which is serious guitar playing, a serious emphasis on solos. But he just kind of pulled back and started saying, I'm gonna do better solos because they're gonna be at least within somewhat of a format. But you know, he's always had those long solos ever since. You know, Just One Night, he does that big long solo in Blues Power or Cocaine. Those are all heirs of the Cream era, and Clapton learned to do that in Cream. It made him a better guitarist, and I think it helped everybody else. Well, thank you. God bless you. I hope you'll consider subscribing.